Today's video will address the Mirage deal in Ukraine. I've already made several videos discussing this, but it seems that now things are well underway. I need to highlight several things here that I find quite important. I was looking at a report I produced here on the channel, which is as follows. First of all, we don't know the number of Mirage jets that will be supplied to Ukraine. The Mirage was a good aircraft when it was launched in 1958. Israel greatly popularized the plane during the Six-Day War in 1967. Israel has been one of the biggest promoters of the Mirage jet to this day. I think they did a better job of promoting it than France even. They are very good at that. But we have to remember, we're talking about 60 years.
Mas a gente tem que lembrar, nós estamos falando de 60 anos, né? A guerra na Ucrânia, ela mostrou o seguinte.
The war in Ukraine showed the following. Although we see a lot of old equipment in the war, for example, the Russians using the T-62, a series of other things, there's talk of the T-55, etc. Modernized T-55, very good, worldwide, which is far superior to any material we have in Latin America. But that's not the issue. Russia has a background. It has the capability in terms of industry, technology, and designers to maintain this equipment with very good performance. Ukraine won't be able to achieve this because, look, if you take a good look at the war in Ukraine from the beginning, we'll see the following. Ukraine started the war with a batch of Soviet-era jets. There was the MiG-29. There was the Sukhoi as well. Then they moved to the F-16. The F-16 hype lasted very little time. We don't hear about the F-16 anymore. If Mirages are arriving, it's because the F-16 is struggling, or it's actually dead. So, it's very difficult to imagine that an Air Force, which in 3 to 4 years, now on February 24th, we will enter the 4th year of the war, has changed aircraft 3 times and to completely different aircraft. The philosophy of the MiG-29 is one thing, the F-16 is another, the concept is different, and the Mirage is yet another concept. Will it perform well? It won't. The trend of war, the trend of any war, anywhere in the world, is that professionals, especially the pilot who needs to be highly skilled, become worse as time goes by. Why do I say this? Because you won't have time to train these people to the proficiency you need in combat. Let me remind you of something. Germany needed, it seems they calculated an average of 60 tons of fuel per pilot to train a pilot. I read this many years ago in a book about World War II. By the end, they didn't have that anymore. So if a guy could take off and land, he was already considered successful. Actual aerial maneuvers, he would learn through on-the-job training. He would do it in combat. So it's very hard to believe that the Mirage will solve Ukraine's problem. France might provide very good generation missiles for the operation of these Mirages, but we have many doubts. We have many doubts about whether France will be able to place technicians on site to keep these missiles operational, because operating a missile is an extremely technical task. That's the truth. From preparation, to placing it on the ramp, to achieving optimal performance, etc. We have many doubts about this. That's the truth. And we have to remember that the Mirages will face Russian jets, like the Sukhoi Su-35 and the latest generation Sukhoi Su-57, with all electronics integrated into Russia's air defense system. Something that I'm not sure Ukraine is managing to integrate into their systems because they have suffered many losses. That's the truth. So this is a very complicated issue in that regard, but we need to analyze others. I'm telling you, and I'm reading the report we produced here on the Arte de Guerra channel. Another thing we have many doubts about is whether these Ukrainian pilots are 100% qualified. There's also the idea of Ukraine using NATO pilots. I mentioned this, and I need to point out something interesting. There was an accident recently in the Philippines. An American plane crashed there, and it said that several contractors died. Folks, contractor is a fancy, nice name, right? because you can put it on LinkedIn for mercenary. I don't think these guys died in the Philippines.
Eu acho que esses caras não morreram nas Filipinas. Os caras devem ter morrido na Ucrânia e a gente
The guys must have died in Ukraine. We know there was a mess with Russia in Ukraine, those conflicts somewhere. American air accidents start appearing in other parts of the world. We're tired of seeing that. So I put things this way, folks. I put things this way, right? It's very unlikely that the Mirage, they might try to use the Mirage against targets firing missiles, etc. They only talk about the Scalper, but we have to remember that the idea of the F-16 was that you don't hear about the F-16 anymore. And the mere fact that the Mirage is going to France means that the F-16 program has sunk for good. More F-16s might arrive in the future.
Pode ser que chegue mais F-16 no futuro. O pessoal está falando disso. Só que a gente tem que olhar que esses países.
People are talking about this, but we have to consider that these countries sending F-16s are waiting for other aircraft to arrive, and NATO is starting to get into a somewhat complicated situation. You're providing armaments and don't have the money to invest in buying newer equipment. So I don't know if more F-16s will arrive in Ukraine in time, because Ukraine is heading towards a debacle. That's the truth. We can see from the negotiations and some statements from some Ukrainian officials that the country's situation is not good at all. We start to look at the state. So I put things this way. I find it very difficult for this Mirage to make any difference. The best the Ukrainian Air Force had was that generation of pilots trained on Soviet-era jets, not because those jets were better than the MiG-26. I won't get into that issue, but these people were acclimated to these aircraft and had qualified mechanics.
Mas esse pessoal era aclimatado para essas aeronaves, você tinha mecânicos habilitados, você tinha uma série de coisas aí, né?
You had a series of things there, technical manuals, tools, procedures, you had all of that. It was the best phase of the Ukrainian Air Force, and it didn't have an effect. Why didn't it have an effect, people? It's fighting with the Leviathan. We need to look at something that I think is very important. The press gave people a wrong notion that Russia, Ukraine, this was crucial. Many people died because of this. The idea that Ukraine was facing an incompetent adversary. Russia is not incompetent at all. It's one of the most capable armies in the world, if not the most capable. Not underestimating the Ukrainian army, because the army is excellent. There's nothing in NATO that compares to Ukraine. In Latin America, it's not even worth mentioning.
Que se equipare à Ucrânia, na América Latina, não precisa nem dizer. Mas ela estava enfrentando uma coisa muito.
But she was facing something much bigger, really much bigger. So she was shattered, that's the truth. The Ukrainian Air Force was shattered. The air defense was rebuilt several times, several units, several good brigades of Ukraine had to be rebuilt. Anyway, the Ukrainian army seems like a zombie. It resurrects, a phoenix. It resurrects with each injection, each flow of money from NATO. This Mirage case is going in that direction too. We don't believe the Mirage will have any effect except for propaganda. This has been a propaganda war so far. So, let's make propaganda out of this.
Até o momento, então vamos fazer uma propaganda em cima disso, vai durar 2, 3 semanas, depois a gente não escuta mais falar do avião. Foi o que aconteceu com o F-16, aconteceu com o HIMARS, com o Patriot, uma série de outras coisas aí.
Patreon, a series of other things. This hype lasts a short time. It's just enough to sell newspapers. You who watched our video, comment on what you think, if the Mirage will solve the problem, if it is the savior of the nation. Leave your comments here. It's important to hear your opinion, okay? Those who want to help the Arte de Guerra channel, there's Super Chat. Remember that Arte de Guerra does not receive money from USAID. We are on USAID's blacklist, right? So, your way to help us is through Pix, which is on the screen, or by purchasing books from Amazon or our courses. I remind you that now,
os nossos cursos, eu lembro que agora vai ter o curso dos homens fortes do Oriente Médio. Vou deixar vocês com a vinheta deles aí, tá?
And we'll meet again soon then, always with responsibility and commitment. See you in Brazil, everyone. Goodbye.
Até mais.
Subtitle by Sonia Ruberti.